Hey everyone, CJ here. Welcome to the third episode of the Water Margin Summarised Series. In the previous episode, we covered the adventures of Lu Zisen, the Flowery Monk, and Pantherhead Ling Cong. By the end of the episode, the framed Ling Cong was pushed over the edge and became a real outlaw by murdering his tormentors. For his safety, his patron Cai Jing recommended that he seek refuge at Mount Liang, a small bandit stronghold which one day will become the grand headquarters of the 108 outlaws. In this episode, I will cover the story of Yang Zi, the blue-faced beast, and the present and future leaders of Mount Liang. For historical and cultural context, among other things, I will also talk about marriage and concubinage in Song Dynasty China. Before I start, let me remind you that we've got these cool shirts and merch for the series. These characters say, "Within the four seas, all men are brothers," a commonly used slogan in the novel. You can support what we are doing by getting these goods from the link below. Alternatively, you can support us on Patreon or make one-off donation by using the Super Thanks button or Coffee. When Ling Cong was brought into the assembly hall, he met the leader of Mount Liang, Wang Lun, and his captains Song Wan and Du Qian. At this point of the story, Mount Liang was just a two-bit bandit outfit run by the failed scholar Wang Lun. He was quite nervous when Ling Cong proposed to join them, since the former polearm trainer of the Imperial Army was way overqualified to be his underling. So to get rid of him, he demanded that Ling Cong had to pass a difficult initiation rite. He had to prove his loyalty by presenting a severed head to him. Since they are in the middle of nowhere, this means that he had to kill an innocent passerby. Ling Cong agreed, and he was given 3 days. Wang Lun was a petty man, hardly fit to be a leader. That's why he didn't last long. Soon enough, he will be replaced in a coup by another leader, Chao Gai. And after him, Song Jiang will assume the position of the final and true leader of Mount Liang. Nur Ha-Zi, the patriarch of the Manchu people who will eventually establish the Qin Dynasty, pretty much learned all about warfare by reading Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Water Margin. While you can learn about war and strategy in Three Kingdoms, in Water Margin you can learn all about Machiavellian backstabbing, inducements, corruption, and all other kinds of dirty dealing. Now, down at the foot of the mountain, Ling Cong wasn't having much luck. On his first day, he saw no one. And on the second day, there were just too many people. And on the third day, the lone baggage carrier he saw ran so fast, he wasn't able to catch him. But wait a minute, the baggage carrier dropped quite a lot of precious goods. Maybe that can substitute for the severed head? Hey, what's the meaning of this? Suddenly, a grim man with blue birthmark on his face called out to Ling Cong. That man was Yang Zi, the blue-faced beast. The baggage that was dropped belonged to him, and he wanted it back. Naturally, the two ended up fighting, and the two warriors were evenly matched. Luckily, Wang Lun and the others arrived to the scene to stop the fight before anyone could get hurt. It was all a misunderstanding. They diffused the situation after a bit of talking. Wang Lun had heard about Yang Zi before. He was a famous figure in Jianghu, and he tried to recruit him to balance against Ling Cong's influence. But Yang Zi politely declined because he was planning to go to the capital to get his old job back as Imperial Guard. Now, this is where we turn the spotlight to Yang Zi, as we momentarily leave Ling Cong, who was begrudgingly employed by an unappreciative boss. Yang Zi was a grim and tough, no-nonsense warrior, with the terrible luck of always losing his baggage. He got into trouble with the law last time when the baggage he was protecting was swept away by a thunderstorm. But since there was a general amnesty, where the emperor would commute everyone's sentence, he decided to use this opportunity to be re-employed. When you commit a crime back then, the strategy of various outlaws was to run and hide somewhere until a general amnesty was announced. Amnesties can be made for various reasons, such as disaster relief or other big events, but it is mostly done at the discretion of the emperor. Depending on the emperor's reign, it may happen regularly or just a handful of times. Unfortunately, Yang Zi was kicked out by Gao Qiu, who wasn't too impressed by his resume. Down on his luck, he had no choice but to sell his heirloom sword in the street. To make things worse, an infamous local ruffian picked trouble with him. After lying about wanting to buy the sword, he tried to wrestle the sword away. So Yang Zi cold-bloodedly cut him down and followed with a couple of extra thrusts to make sure that the job is done. Well, obviously, he had to be taken to the magistrate for this. But since everyone hated the ruffian anyway, the people pleaded mercy for him, and he was given the lighter sentence of military servitude. He was exiled to Daming district. Over there, he impressed the governor with his martial prowess by fighting his best general, So Cao, the impatient vanguard, to a standstill. Yang Zi is the perfect man to guard a delivery tribute to his father-in-law, Cai Jing, the government thought. Cai Jing was a historical person, one of the 6 scoundrels who was blamed for the downfall of Northern Song dynasty. In Water Margin, he became one of the primary antagonists, and to match his treacherous image, this tribute was the fruit of the governor's corruption. Meanwhile, in the nearby district of Yunceng, law enforcement officers Zhu Tong, Lord of the Beautiful Beard, and Lei Heng, the Winged Tiger, had been put on high alert due to recent bandit activities from Mount Liang. Soon enough, Lei Heng picked up a suspicious figure in an abandoned temple. That man was Liu Tang, the red-haired devil. This wild-looking man was not just your common vagrant. He's actually got a secret with him. Luckily for Liu Tang, Lei Heng and the officers made a stop at the local village chief, Chao Gai's house. Just the man Liu Tang was looking for. With a proverbial nod and a wink, Chao Gai pretended that Liu Tang was his long-lost nephew and told the officers that it was all a misunderstanding. Since Chao Gai was an upstanding citizen known for his generosity and love of justice, they believed his story. To further smoothen things, he also greased their palms with some silvers, of course. Now that the copper's gone, they got right into business. Apparently, Liu Tang had picked up some juicy info about a cartload of ill-gotten treasures being transported out of Daming. If they were to intercept it, they would become filthy rich. Oh, Chao Gai liked the idea. But they can't just saunter in and tell them to stick them up. Especially when they've got somebody like Yang Zi guarding the transport. This needs to be approached carefully. They need to plan a heist. First, they get Chao Gai's old friend, Wu Yong, the professor, to be their strategist. Chao Gai, you son of a gun! I'm in! And the 3 Ruan brothers. Chao Gai, you son of a gun, we're in! And finally, the Taoist priest, Gongsun Seng. Chao Gai, you son of a gun, I'm in! With the addition of Bai Seng, the Daylight Rat playing as minor patsy, the Chao Gai Seven launched their heist. Meanwhile, on the other side, while transferring the treasure, Yang Zi had been behaving very professionally. He kept an eye open at anything suspicious, even at some innocuous date sellers resting before them. Moments later, a wine seller approached them and rested nearby too. Looking at the 2 refreshing barrels of wine, Yang Zi's crew became quite thirsty and pestered him to allow them to buy it. Request denied. Yang Zi was wary that the wine might be drugged. After the date seller bought 1 barrel and finished it, Yang Zi was still unconvinced that it was safe. Then, he saw the date sellers pranking the wine seller by stealing ladles of wine from the other barrel and drank from it too. It seems that the other barrel is safe too. After a bit more pestering by the crew, Yang Zi relented and allowed them to buy the wine, as soon as the wine seller took back the ladle of stolen wine. Yang Zi was reluctant to drink at first, but he eventually had a bit himself. And he saw his crew falling unconscious one by one, until he himself blacked out too. By the time he woke up, the cargo he was guarding was gone. His boss would have his head for this. Obviously, this was a successful heist by the Chao Gai Seven. The date sellers were actually them in disguise, and Bai Seng was the wine seller. So where did the drug come from? Why were they alright when they drank the wine? Well, actually, the wine were all safe in the beginning, until the drug was mixed in later with the second ladle, when they pretended to steal from the second bucket and drink from it. Yang Zi felt so stupid he would have killed himself. But in the end, he decided against it and became an outlaw once again. At first, he wanted to go to Mount Liang, but after he met Cao Zheng, Ling Cong's former disciple, and Lu Zhiseng, who was on the run from Gao Qiu's goons for saving Ling Cong, they decided to go to Twin Dragon's Peak instead. They defeated the bandit leader there and took over the organization, with Lu Zhiseng becoming the new leader. Their story will be continued in later chapters. Back in the capital, Cai Jing, the intended recipient of the robbed cargo, was angered by this audacious crime. So he sent his best investigators to sniff out the culprit. Bai Sheng was the first one to be caught, and after he was tortured, he started naming names. Chao Gai's days are numbered. Officers then gathered at Yuncheng to arrest him. But as they were doing the paperwork, they are experiencing an unexpected delay. Unbeknownst to them, the registrar was actually a friend of Chao Gai, his sworn brother even. He informed Chao Gai of the imminent arrest, so he was able to escape in the nick of time, with some additional help from Zhu Tong and Lei Heng, who looked the other way because they are also friends of Chao Gai. Chao Gai then regrouped with his 6 other accomplices and went to join the bandits at Mount Liang. Wang Lun welcomed them with big open arms. But in reality, he was quite reluctant to accept them because they've brought too much heat with them. Wu Yong saw through this facade. At the same time, he also saw Ling Cong's blatant dissatisfaction with Wang Lun as leader. Capitalizing on this, they pulled Ling Cong to their side and launched a coup to kill Wang Lun and took over the base for themselves. As for his lieutenants, Song Wan and Du Qian just quietly followed their new master. Yep, for so-called righteous bandits, there were actually quite a lot of backstabbing and internal conflict. Now, with Mount Liang unified under Chao Gai's control, they repelled the government forces and their fame started to grow. Chao Gai was not an ungrateful man. He knew that all this was made possible by his friends. So, he ordered Liu Tang to bring some money with him to bribe the authorities to get Bai Sheng out of prison, and also to reward his loyal sworn brother who helped him escape, Song Jiang, the future leader of the 108 Mount Liang bandits. Song Jiang was a total bro, righteous, generous, and possessing godly amount of charisma. And he had helped a lot of outlaws and people of Jianghu in time of needs, just like a rain during drought. That's why his nickname was Timely Rain. Among the 108 outlaws, he was the only one who was based on a historical person. But other than some little details, we don't know what the real Song Jiang was like. The fictional Song Jiang, however, followed the usual Confucian hero mold. Virtuous, strongly charismatic, and just like the fictional Liu Bei, quite hypocritical too. As a philanthropist, he helped not just outlaws, but also other people who are in need. At one time, he helped a poor old woman to buy a coffin for her deceased husband. He was then offered to take her daughter, Po Si's hand in marriage. Song Jiang really didn't have much time for women. But after much persuasion, he relented and took her in. In Song Dynasty, common man can have as many concubines as he can afford, but only one legal wife. Concubines are lower-ranked wives, but their level is really much closer to the maids rather than a secondary wife. However, their children can become the father's heir too. To be a wife, the marriage needs to go through proper ceremony. The wife's side also need to provide some form of dowry, and this is usually arranged by the parents' families, usually from similar social status. Marrying concubine, however, is much more casual. It is usually done through matchmakers, and ceremonies are not needed. They would also need to perform menial tasks, like a maid, besides being the husband's sexual partner. That is why some wives may even suggest for the husband to get a concubine. They are not too fussed about the concubines getting elevated to become a wife during the Song Dynasty, because it was a major taboo back then. But divorced wives may be sold as concubines or maids. However, the fact that Song Jiang didn't make Po Si his wife or even a concubine, it means that he is really not into her. He just found her a place to stay and covered her expenses as a mistress. Since Song Jiang was more interested in dude bro stuff anyway, he didn't spend much time with his new mistress after the first few nights. Craving love and attention, she had an affair with Song Jiang's colleague instead. Song Jiang was miffed when he caught wind of this rumor, but he didn't really care. Not long after, Liu Tang came to see Song Jiang to give him 100 taels of gold from Chao Gai as a gift. But Song Jiang declined the hefty reward because he was ever so gracious. Now this is going to bite him in the back, because as soon as he left the meeting, he met his mistress's nosy mother, and he was whirlwinded back to spend the night with her daughter. Patricia wasn't too pleased to see him, and he's got nothing to say to her either. So the awkward night just quietly passed. Song Jiang left first thing in the morning. Not long after, he realized that he had left Chao Gai's letter in Patricia's room. Oh crud! He couldn't let anybody see it! So he quickly ran back to get it. But it was too late. Patricia had read and hidden the letter. Now she's using it to extort him. He had to agree to 3 conditions to get the letter back. 1. She wants him to sign a contract on paper to allow her to marry the man she's having an affair with. Sure, Song Jiang agreed. 2. She wants to keep all the jewelry, wardrobe, and furniture he had given her. Sure. The desperate Song Jiang agreed again. As for the final requests, she wanted the 100 taels of gold written in the letter. Whoops! Song Jiang had declined the gift, and personally, he didn't have that kind of money laying around either. Not believing him, Patricia threatened him further, and this time, the threats were barbed by insults. Then, things started to get really heated, and the next thing he knew, Song Jiang had a dagger in his hand, and with it, he ended her violently. When Song Jiang regained his senses, he quickly burned the letter and vamooshed. Soon after, Zhu Tong was dispatched to Song Jiang's family home with a warrant. Back then, collective punishment may be applied to the whole family if the crime was serious enough. But with Song Jiang being a registrar, he had preempted this kind of problem and severed his family ties with a certificate, and he lived in another home. Well, Zhu Tong went in anyway to search, and he uncovered a hidden panel that led to a hiding space. There he is, Song Jiang, his old pal. Zhu Tong was quite a haohan despite being a copper. He came to tell his good friend Song Jiang that he will cover for him, but he had to go ASAP. So after Zhu Tong declared that he couldn't find Song Jiang and directed his crew away, Song Jiang, accompanied by his brother Song Qing, left to find refuge at the philanthropist Cai Jing's place in Changzhou. Over there, Song Jiang met another guest at Cai Jing's, a big and rough man who goes by the name Wu Song. On the next episode, I will cover the original Wu Song story. Is he really a heroic tiger slayer, or is he really just a monster? Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss it. Also, remember that we've got great t-shirt and merch you can get to support the channel. Before I go, I would also like to thank all our patrons at Patreon and other contributors for making this series possible. Until next time, stay cool, my bros!